Ambernic put out 11 devices in 2024. Now, some might say that all of these different variations of pretty much the same hardware are unnecessary. And I have to admit that the stuff that they put out in 2025 hasn't appealed to me as much as the stuff that they have put out previously. But most of that comes down to personal preferences, not necessarily that these are bad devices. They just aren't the devices that I personally want. They definitely slowed down their release cadence in 2025, and I think that that is overall a good thing. Full transparency, Ambernic sends me these devices for free sometimes, though I'm under no obligation to make a video. They're not expecting one from me, and even if they were, they don't get to see it before you guys do. No money changed hands at any point, but even if money had changed hands, I would be telling you exactly what I'm telling you right now, and that's because your trust is far more important to me than a paycheck from a brand. So today I figured I would talk about the newest retro handhelds that I have here in the NerdNest, which is the clamshell device from Ambernic, the RG34X SP, and then the brand new RG35X Pro. Both of these have pretty much the same chipsets, but let's start off with the RG34X SP and take a look at its stats. It's got a 3.4-inch screen, 720 by 480 at a 3:2 aspect ratio, which is perfect for GBA games. The CPU is the same H700 that we see in the rest of the XX line. It also has the same GPU and the same battery, basically 3,300 milliamp hours, but this one has 2 gigs of RAM versus the 1 gig of RAM that's in the 35XX SP and the 35XX Pro. It has dual SD card slots, one for the operating system and one for your ROMs. Let's walk around the outside of the console. All right, on the top, we've got our triggers and our bumpers, including our USB power and HDMI out. I will say that I've lost my HDMI cord that would fit with this device, and that means that I can't actually tell you what it's like to hook up to a TV. I've ordered a new one off Amazon, and if you really want me to talk about the HDMI out capabilities of a device like this, let me know in the comments section down below. When that cord comes in, maybe I will make an update video. Let's move on and talk about the right-hand side, which has our power and reset buttons, as well as one of our 2 SD card slots and our LED indicators. On the bottom, we've got our 3.5mm headphone jack, if you are so inclined to use that kind of thing. Then we have another SD card and our volume buttons, and then you can open it up and we can see all of our buttons. I will say that the face buttons, they feel really good. They're not too clicky, they're not too mushy. They're like Goldilocks. They are just right. Then we've got our start and select buttons, which are way more clicky. That doesn't bother me at all because I don't use them nearly as often. It's the same with the menu button. I would say that the menu button and the start and select buttons feel pretty much the same. The D-pad is a lot bigger than the D-pad that is on the little brother to this, which is the GBA, the original GBA form factor. That D-pad is very, very tiny, and I hate it, and that means I almost never use this device. This one has a much better D-pad, and I appreciate it, though we'll talk about how that D-pad fares a little bit later on in the video. Below the D-pad, we've got our thumbsticks, which are very, very short thumbsticks. I would say even smaller than like Switch thumbsticks, and they're down in like a little recessed bank so that you can close the clamshell, which is a good design. The thumbsticks, they don't stick out and my thumbs don't hit them by accident, but honestly, this is a 3:2 aspect ratio device. I can't see myself playing N64 games on this, even though they seem to be working fine. I have no desire to play N64 on a device like this. All right, let's talk about the D-pad on this thing. I ended up firing up Contra, just like my friend Russ does over at Retro Gamecore. If you haven't subscribed to his YouTube channel, you absolutely should. Just subscribe here before you go over there. Basically, the way that this test works is you push down on the D-pad in a game like Contra, and then your character lays down, and then you just rock your finger back and forth to see if you get accidental inputs. I will say that on this one, I got some accidental inputs, which was a little bit frustrating. which gave me hope that it would be easier for me to do Hadoukens and Shoryukens in Street Fighter. So the next thing that I did was I fired up Street Fighter, and I would say that I was probably able to get maybe like a 60% success rate on Hadoukens and Shoryukens. If you're hardcore into fighting games, I would say that this device probably isn't for you. But I mean, let's be honest, this is not a device for fighting games, because most fighting games you want to play against other people. And unless you're hooking this up to a TV, I don't really see a good reason to be playing fighting games on this. Now, maybe you just really like to fight against the computer, and that's perfectly fine. I would say this is probably going to be okay for fighting game fans, but there's definitely better D-pads out there. I jumped into the software input-output tests on Ambernic's operating system, and as you can see here, there is no directional snapping on the joysticks, which is very good to hear. Like I said earlier, the joysticks are not getting in the way. I cannot see myself using them for any reason at all, though, because this has a 3x2 screen. The screen's already only 3.4 inches, so it's a very small screen, and it's the wrong aspect ratio to play games that would require joysticks, because most of the games that would require joysticks are going to automatically add black bars to the sides of this device. So you take an already small screen and you make it even smaller. It just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to put joysticks on a system like this. I will say that I have definite bias when it comes to joysticks on devices like this, because for me, I personally don't feel nostalgia for joystick style games. The nostalgia games that are nostalgic for me are 8-bit, 16-bit, Atari, that kind of thing. And none of those would require an analog joystick anyway. So I almost always would prefer to get a device that doesn't have that. If I want to play games that need a joystick, I would very much prefer to use a full-size joystick, in which case I would play it on my Steam Deck or my Lenovo Legion Go S, or on my computer with like a real controller, because the joysticks would be better in that case. The form factor for this is actually pretty nice. It's very pocketable. It's not nearly as pocketable as, say, the Miu Mini Plus, but I know that a lot of people prefer the clamshell form factor. I also really like clamshell form factor because it protects the device. All you have to do is snap it closed, which is very satisfying to do when you're done playing a game. I mean, if you're old like me, go back to the old days when you were finished with a phone call. Hanging up the phone was a satisfying thing. Now we just tap a piece of glass and we don't get any of that feedback. It's not nearly as satisfying. When you're playing on a system like this and you're like, okay, I'm done playing, just snap it closed and then the system automatically goes to sleep. It's awesome. I love clamshell devices for that reason alone. It's almost exactly the same size as the Miu Flip. It's a good deal smaller than the RG35X SP. I gotta be honest, for this particular device, I would really only recommend it if you were somebody who definitely wants to play GBA games. The reason being is because of the screen. It's a 3x2 aspect ratio screen. Only the GBA has a 3x2 aspect ratio, and because of that, I just don't see myself playing anything else on here because everything's just too small and my eyes are too old. The other option that you have for GBA games that would be a really good option would be this. This is the Ambernic RG35X. It's essentially the same exact hardware, except it's in a non-clamshell device. It's in a candy bar size instead, or layout instead. This, I would say, is a little bit less pocketable, even though it's a very flat device. There's no joysticks on it, which is great. But I think I said earlier in the review, I can't remember, talking about this D-pad. The D-pad is like the tiniest D-pad you've ever seen. I know that it's pretty true to what the original GBA was like, but I just hate it. And I also don't like having start and select over on the left-hand side vertical over each other. I prefer start and select to be separated. But if I am going to be playing a GBA game, I think I'd probably rather play it on the clamshell just because it's a little bit more pocketable. The screen size just feels like such a strange choice. I know that people are buying this to play GBA games on it because of that 3:2 aspect ratio, but it's already very small. And the only games that you're going to be playing that are a 3:2 aspect ratio are GBA games. So if you're looking for a unitasker, this is actually pretty good. But for me, I would prefer to play most of my 8 and 16-bit games all on the same device instead of having them separated. So it just doesn't appeal to me. Moving on, we've got the RG35X Pro. So what makes this Pro? Well, based on the system specs, I think just the joysticks, but let's take a look at the system specs. It's got the same chipset as the rest of the XX line, so we should expect the same power performance that you're going to see on all of the other XX handhelds. The same CPU, the same GPU. This one has 1 gig of RAM. I don't understand why ANBERNIC decided to put 2 gigs of RAM in the 34XX SP and only 1 gig of RAM in the 35XX Pro. That's a question for them. The battery in it is a 3200 milliamp hour battery, which is slightly smaller than the other units, but not enough to really matter. And it's got a 3.5-inch screen with a 3:4 aspect ratio at a resolution of 640 by 480. Because of the 4:3 aspect ratio, it's going to be a lot more useful for more systems. You're not going to be locked to the GBA for your systems because the bezels are going to be much smaller, especially if you're not sticking with integer scaling and you want to take up more of that screen real estate. Let's walk around the outside. Starting with the top, we have our headphone jack, our HDMI out, and our USB-C for charging. Most of the time, these units will ship with power cords that you want to use when you plug them into like a USB port on your computer. If you try other USB-C cords, they may or may not work, and that is pretty much the case with most of these cheaper Linux handhelds. On the right-hand side, we've got our power and our reset button. On the bottom, there's nothing. And then on the left-hand side, we've got our volume rockers and one of our SD card slots. On the back, we have our shoulder buttons and our triggers. I will say that this feels a little bit more round than other vertical handheld devices that I have. And then we've got our buttons on the front. The face buttons, they feel a little bit mushier than the RG34XX SP, just a little bit, not a whole lot. The start and select buttons feel a lot less clicky, and the menu button feels less clicky as well. We also have much larger joysticks. These look like they were just extras from Nintendo Switches or something, but they're definitely Switch-style joysticks. Again, for me, these devices don't need joysticks. They'd be more pocketable if they didn't have the joysticks, and I could easily say goodbye to these joysticks. There's nothing about them that I need. The D-pad is much bigger than on the 35XX SP. A little more round and a little mushier feeling. We'll talk about how that held up on our Contra test and Street Fighter test in a little bit. I will say that this feels a little more rounded on the back than other vertical handhelds, even from Ambernic, than ones that I've held, especially this part right in the middle between the two sets of triggers. I don't know what it is about it. It just feels a little bit smoother and rounder. The plastic feels really good. I really like the way it looks with the transparency. The green transparency just looks freaking awesome on this thing. A very visually cool looking device. Let's talk about the D-pad test. Contra, it was very hard to get accidental inputs in the Contra test. This one did way better than on the 34XX SP. Then in Street Fighter, I would say Hadoukens were no problem. Shoryukens were much harder for me to pull off on this particular one. I would say I had about maybe a 50% success rate on this D-pad versus the other one. I will say that I personally very much prefer disc-style D-pads to cross-style D-pads, and because of that, I'm usually a little bad at Hadoukens and Shoryukens. Just like before, I jumped into the operating system to check out the input and outputs. I could see no snapping when it came to the left stick. The right stick, for some reason, is mapped to ABXY in their operating system. So when you are testing that, it shows those buttons lighting up instead. Just like on the last one, the joysticks are recessed enough that they don't seem to get in your way. But again, no real use for this. The only games that I would really use this for would be N64 games. And because, and like I would have to remap the right stick to be the C buttons on N64 games. It never feels right without an N64 controller. So I have no use for thumbsticks on devices like this. That said, they're nice thumbsticks, so maybe it would be useful to you. If it didn't have joysticks, it would definitely be more pocketable, and I think that I would be much more likely to use it and bring it with me places, but because of the joysticks, it's relegated to backpack, and so I would only ever go somewhere with it if I had my backpack with me. That said, if you are looking for something that's more pocketable, I think that the pocketable king, in my opinion, is a screen protected Miu Mini Plus. I absolutely love this device. It's got a 3.5-inch screen. It's nice and small, fits in your pocket super easy, does not have joysticks. This is the real winner if you can get your hands on one. If you're looking for something with a bigger screen, I think Ambernic has an answer for you. This is the Ambernic RG35X, which is essentially the same thing as this, but it has only one joystick that I'll never use, and it's got a 4-inch screen, so it just looks much, much better, and I love how small the bezels are on this device. As far as both of these systems go, I think that nobody's going to be running to the mountaintops to scream their praises, just like nobody's going to be chucking them in the garbage because they're junk. They're both just fine. If I were looking for something that had a 3.5-inch screen and a clamshell form factor, I would probably end up going with the RG35X It's got a bigger screen, it's 4x3, it's going to be better for most systems, and honestly, it's just a little more comfortable in the hand because of that bigger. I know it's a little bit bigger than these systems, but it just feels more roomy when you are actually playing games on it. If I were looking for something more pocketable, I would probably go with the Miu Mini Plus. It's got that 3.5-inch screen, no joysticks, plays all the games that I want just fine, and the screen is just fantastic, and Onion OS on here is almost perfect. Keep in mind, my personal preferences when it comes to this stuff is to play 8 and 16-bit games that don't require a whole lot of power, don't need a joystick, and so, maybe what I'm talking about doesn't necessarily line up with the types of games that you want to play. So if what you are hearing about these particular devices is not meshing well with you, then definitely check out some other reviews. I would check out TechDweeb, I would check out Retro Gamecore. They always have really good reviews on this stuff. But before you go and see their stuff, make sure that you subscribe here. But which ones appeal to you the most? What's your favorite retro handheld right now that came out in 2025? Let me know in the comment section down below. And if it's your first time here, please subscribe. From the NerdNest, I'm Bill. Stay rad. Thanks for watching.